My name is Katherine Brumfield. I'm the manager of career services at the Colorado School of Public Health. We are located at the Anschutz Medical Campus and the Colorado State University in Fort Collins and the University of Northern Colorado in Greeley. We are tri-institutional, which is something very unique for the university and for the Colorado School of Public Health. And today I'm so excited to talk to Andrew Hudson. Andrew, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and we'll jump in.
Sure. My name is Andrew Hudson, and I run andrewhudsonsjobslist.com, which is a job board that is very specific to Colorado and jobs that are all over the state, primarily the metro area, but jobs throughout the state.
Yeah, you have been running this job board since 1998.
Yeah, it's been like 27 years. I can't
Yeah, I know. And I'm sure you've seen the job market in Colorado change so much throughout the years.
Yeah, no, it's totally true. And just to be clear, if you're a job seeker, you can go to andrewhudsonsjobslist.com and it's totally free to look at all the different jobs. And like I say, they're very tailored to the Colorado economy, Colorado companies, nonprofits, universities, government agencies, and so forth. But yeah, I started this 27 years ago, and it was really just a passion project for the first 10 years where I was working for Mayor Wellington Webb, and at the time I was his press secretary, and I tried to do something that press secretaries do, which was to somehow leapfrog over the mainstream press with our communications efforts. And I created an email list of influencers. These were business leaders, political leaders, community leaders. And I would just send them out information about the mayor's office, about the city, about what was going on. And this list kept growing and growing. And before I know it, people were asking me if I could post jobs on this list because it was going to just a lot of different people. What
Yeah.
started out as like 200 people quickly ballooned to about 2,000 people. Then it quickly ballooned to about 10,000 people. And so when I left the mayor's office, I went to work for Frontier Airlines, where I oversaw all the advertising and marketing. And I don't know if you remember the Talking Animal campaign for Frontier
Yes.
Airlines. So that was my big deal, overseeing all of that, and amongst other things, the communications efforts. And we had a really great team at Frontier back in those days. And but I had to start thinking about giving up this list because it was just
Yeah.
every free moment I was having to add people to the list and posting jobs, and at this point it had just become a list for just jobs. But I got a company out of Boulder that contacted me. This was a husband and wife team, and they said, "Look, we really appreciate what you're doing, but your delivery sucks." And it really did. I mean, it was just a Comcast email where I was copying and
Yeah.
pasting all the jobs and sending it all, and then Comcast was accusing me of being a scammer and or a spammer and all of this, and it became really, really difficult to just kind of manage it. And so this company came to me, and they had a similar to a constant contact operation where I
Yeah.
could efficiently create a basic website, and then I had a email management system that allowed people to sign on easily. If they wanted to jump off the list, they could do that, and companies could then post the jobs, and it became very efficient for everybody. And so I started doing it that way. And then in 2008, um, my mother had passed away and she'd left me a little bit of an inheritance. And I had just started to think, kind of people get into their mid career life crises about, what am I here for? What do I want to do? And I started thinking about that myself. And I'm like, if I could really figure out a way to put my full time efforts, my skills, my expertise in marketing and communications and all of that into this website, then that's what I would do. And so I started doing some basic business research. I was not an entrepreneur at all at that point. I was just trying to figure it all out. And in August of 2008, I'd let everyone know that it was now going to cost to post a job. It was still going to be free for job seekers. And the most amazing thing happened is when I flipped the switch and I was charging companies and nonprofits different rates to post their jobs, um, the amount of traffic just doubled. And it taught me a lesson as an entrepreneur, which was, yeah, I put in that 10 years of sweat equity, but now that I was actually charging a price for it, the value, psychologically, the value of the product became more significant. And so companies were absolutely had no problem paying to post their jobs. It was free before, but now they're paying me to post the jobs, and it just it gave me the motivation to be able to quit my full-time job and just commit myself to this. So I've been running the site for about 27 years. I do job seeking consulting. I work with folks on resumes. I work with companies on job descriptions and working with them on interviewing and doing a lot of different things in that way. And so I've really had my thumb on the job market here in Colorado for a long time, both through a recession in 2008, COVID, and now where we're at right now, which is also a very kind of different place.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you brought up the like 2008 and the COVID and now because the job market does go like this. It's never just or
Yeah, and
it's
Colorado in particular has always been
yeah.
really susceptible to these boom and bust eras
Yeah.
of our economy as well, and I think we're kind of seeing that right now.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, I don't know if you know this, but in the career counselor like community, you're like the top celebrity for us
Oh,
and
that's great
your
to
job
hear.
board. Yeah, your job board is always a go-to recommendation for me. I always tell people to put that on their list and make sure they're checking your job board. And what's great now is on your website, you can sign up for email alerts.
Yeah, yeah. If you have some specific areas that you want to receive emails when a new job comes up, all you have to do is go in there and type in the categories that you want to receive those from. So
Yeah.
yeah, that becomes very helpful as well. Job boards are, mine included. They're really good for job seeking, but I also tell job seekers that they also can offer a little bit of false hope. I mean, I know all of the pain points that job seekers go through, and one of them is job boards and putting
Yeah.
your blood, sweat, and tears into a resume and a cover letter that is very, very specific, and then getting ghosted,
Yeah.
or finding out that the job isn't real, and we can get into this more, going through these applicant tracking systems where a human being is not even reading your resume, and you get a automated response within 10 minutes saying, you don't qualify for the job, and you're just
Yep.
left scratching your head. But um, what I try to do, and what I think is different from others, is that I like to think that the jobs on my job board are real, and it's
Yes.
very localized. And I try my hardest to make sure that if a company takes down a job from like their website, that they're also taking it down from mine, so it's not up there. And but again, I mean, job boards are great, but if I tell people this all the time, if you're sitting in front of a computer for 6 hours a day, just randomly sending out resumes on job boards, that's going to be a very, very difficult way to find a job. It's kind of like, fishing for a shark with a worm. There's a job seeking is a full contact sport. It's something where there's a lot of different elements that go into it to be successful.
Absolutely. I love that you say that because I always tell people you should set up a job search schedule for yourself. That should include
Right.
lots of different tasks, not just one. And make a list of job boards you want to check and make a list of companies you want to check and make a list of, people on LinkedIn you want to follow. Like you should be looking in lots of different places and talking to lots of different people.
Yeah, and I always call them, don't think of them as job boards, think of them as prospect boards. Because at the
Ah,
end of the day, I mean, if you find that job that not only match their qualifications, but that the job matches your criteria, which you have to have yourself, and then you can start thinking about, okay, is there anybody I know? Is there a connection? Is there somebody, a first, second degree connection on LinkedIn? Is there somebody on their board? Is there somebody that works there that I know? Any way that I can start making myself known that I want to apply for this job, and start thinking about that. I always joke, it's like if you go to a nightclub, there's usually three entrances. There's the entrance for everybody, where there's a big line of people going down the street. There's the VIP entrance, which, people who have the money or the
Yeah.
celebrity or whatever getting in. But there's always that third entrance, and it might be down the alley and through the kitchen, and you got to bang on the door and sneak in or do whatever you got to do. But I'm always telling job seekers, look for that third entrance because there's got to be a third entrance in there that you
Yeah.
can differentiate yourself, that you can find the way in and get in front of somebody and get some attention for yourself.
I love that analogy because I always say there's people get jobs in lots of different ways. There's not
Yeah,
one strategy that is going to work for everyone. So
yeah,
you kind of have to try it all
yeah.
and see what works.
Well, I'll tell you a quick story.
Yeah.
I was working with a woman who we worked on her resume and really built up this nice resume for her. She was in the recruiting world, and when
Yeah.
we got done with her resume, I said, "Okay, now what are you going to do with your resume?" So we talked a lot about networking and making that first tier list of people that that have ever said, "If you're thinking about making a move, see me first," or folks that you've worked with that know what you're about, that could understand you. But there's also a second and third tier, which are, a second tier of folks in your network are folks that you might not know them as close, but they know about you or they know who you are.
Yeah.
And then there's a third tier, which is just the cold calls and the people that you just
Yep.
meet and start talking about yourself to them. And it's funny because I've driven in Ubers before, Lyfts, and I people have handed me their resume, the drivers, and they have a stack of resumes there, and that's one way of networking. Anyway, in this particular case, I said, "What are you going to do with your resume right now?" She says, "Well, what do you mean?" And I said, "Well, now it's time to start networking." And I get this a lot, and I totally get it. Some people are, "Oh, I don't have a network, I'm not engaged in the community. I'm kind of an introvert. I sit behind my computer and I said everybody has a network of some sort." I said, let's start right now. Who in your neighborhood is in your network?" And she thought about it and she says, "Well, I'm on the HOA board, and there's this one woman who works for Colorado Public Radio, and I really appreciate Colorado Public Radio. I follow them. It's on my kind of my prospect list of companies I'd like to work with." I said, "All right, so go down, knock on the door, have your 2 minute spiel and your ask. And every time you network, you have to make an ask
Yeah.
because otherwise it's just like it's an information back and forth. But if you ask them to do something or ask for something, then they become a little bit more attached to your goal. And so the ask could be, "Do you have a job?" The ask could be, "Can you hand my resume over to your recruiter?" The ask could be, "Can you open up your Rolodex and give me 5 names that I can call and say that you've referred me?" So anyway, she went down there and she calls me back a couple days later. She goes, "You're not going to believe this, but I did what you said." And I knocked on the door, and she called me back an hour later and said, "You're not going to believe this, but a recruiting position just opened up at Colorado Public Radio." So she got her resume in there. Week later, she calls me back. She said she's going in for the final interview. And then 2 weeks later, she called me back and said that she got hired. Now, I wish it was just as easy as that, but it's at the same time, it's this sense of a closed mouth doesn't get fed.
Exactly.
So it's if you don't do that, then no one will ever know. And the thing is, particularly in networking, I mean, it might not end up with the job right away, but you're creating top of mind.
Yeah.
You're creating top of mind for that person. So all these people that you're talking to, they're also out there talking to folks. They're out there listening, and it happens all the time. But networking is such a critical part of the job
So,
search.
oh my gosh, absolutely. And just putting yourself out there, like people don't know if you don't tell them.
That's right. That's right. And the other part of this is that I hear so much from job seekers who say, "I feel so powerless. I don't have power. It just feels like a random occurrence that I might get my resume picked up and I
Yeah.
might get an interview." That's totally not true. You have so much power in your job search
Yeah.
in ways that you never even thought about. Um,
Absolutely.
there's a thing I like to talk about, which is that um, at Frontier Airlines, for example, when we were building up the brand, we had this wonderful animal campaign, the talking animals.
Yeah.
And but as cute and as wonderful as that was, the fact is that if we didn't deliver on the brand promise, of what Frontier Airlines was saying. And at the time, we changed our slogan from the Spirit of the West to a whole different animal. So we're making this brand promise of being different, right?
Yeah.
And we reached kind of the pinnacle of the first two levels of advertising, which was awareness and trial. So those commercials just they went crazy. I mean, we had so many people coming to Frontier because they were so taken aback by these cute animals, and people were asking not what seat they're on, they wanted to know what animal they were on. I mean, and I went to our CEO and I said, look, if we've reached this great level of awareness and trial, but if we want to build it to loyalty, I said we have to make sure that that brand promise is actually true and that we're
Yeah.
actually delivering on that. And the way that we did that is we looked at every touch point that we had with our public, our consumers, our potential clients, folks who had flown us, and were we being different at each of
Yeah.
those touch points?
Wow.
And so to the point where somebody's leaving an airline or leaving a Frontier flight and looking back and saying, wow, that was different. And the difference was that it was better. And giving the employees that ability to make decisions and listening to the frontline employees about, we knew what the pain points of traveling were. So, but we also knew what the points of differentiation were to make it better. So my whole point in this is that as a job seeker, you also have these touch points in your job search where you have power to differentiate yourself. You have power to influence and persuade people that you are better and you're the right candidate. Because let's face it, you're in the marketplace of job seekers, but you are a product in the marketplace of job seekers. And in very much the same way, you're trying to reach what in advertising they would say is your cognitive side of your brain and also the emotional side of your brain. And so when you're presenting yourself, you're creating these things that people are understanding, the whys, the logically why this person is a good person to fill this role. But emotionally, they're also thinking and creating these imagination moments about, wow, she'd be a great culture fit. I can imagine her being part of this team. She's fun. She'd be somebody that is inspiring and motivating. And it's like we all do. I mean, there's certain products out there. It's like, yeah, they meet our needs, but we're also, wow, the design of that is really cool. I just get a really good feeling from it. So the touch points are your resume, your cover letter, your digital footprint, your LinkedIn, your social media stuff, your networking, and of course your interviews. And those are the big ones. And across all of those touch points, there's this consistency of a brand promise. There's a consistency of your brand touching all of those areas where it's authentic and it's confident. And I even tell people even before they even write a resume, ask yourself the question, number one, who am I and what is it that I want to do? And start connecting all of those dots so that you're having this resume that is consistent with your cover letters and consistent with how you talk about yourself. And it's full of stories of success, stories of accomplishment, stories of how you got to where you're at, stories of why your boss loved you and promoted you, stories of how you inspired and motivated. I mean, all of those things come into this. So, anyway,
Yeah. No, I love it. I could talk about this stuff all the time. And it's funny you brought this up because I was reading your articles on your website and the article about building blocks for job seekers success. I highlighted you are a product in the marketplace of a job seeker where you are competing against other products. And I love that because you're using career development and career strategies like marketing, and you really are marketing yourself and your skills, your knowledge, your abilities. I was talking to a doctor yesterday, and he was struggling with talking about himself in an interview. And I realized he was missing the how and the why. He was saying the what. He
yeah,
obviously knew what he was doing, but he wasn't describing the how and the why. And that's when I said to him, "You're selling yourself. Like you have to pitch. You are selling your skills, knowledge, and abilities." And I think that's very similar to how you have this as your product. You're the
yeah.
product.
One, I'll tell you, an interesting thing I do with my the job seekers I consult with, if and believe me, it's a very common thing for people to talk about themselves, and it's a struggle. It's not easy. I mean,
No.
it's one of those things that, even I've met with expert marketing folks and people in PR who can sell stories and narratives and about everything else, but when you ask them about themselves, it's just like they don't know what to say. But one of the things I always ask them if they're struggling, I'm like, okay, tell me, what was one of your proudest accomplishments in your career? And tell me why. And all of a sudden, I mean, you can just see their brains start churning and they start talking about a project or something that they did, and the richness of detail and the richness of, how they did it, why they did it, what were the challenges and how they overcame them, how did they have to motivate and inspire, and also what was the end result of that. And so if job seekers can start telling those stories about themselves, think about that first question that you get in an interview. So, we'd like to learn more about you. Can you tell us something about yourself? And instead of saying a litany of what's already on the resume, start saying, my experience has led me to this because, and here's what I've had to do in my most recent positions that, and not only starting to spell out, the story about yourself, but also taking control of that interview in ways that people are dropping their pencils and they're nodding their heads and they're starting to get that, those imagination moments of you being in that role.
And
And
truly getting to know you, right?
yeah, and the other thing is, and people who struggle with interviews, they usually say they're going in there and they're feeling insecure on either one of two extremes. Either they're coming off as desperate
Yeah.
or they're coming off as arrogant. And those are
Yeah.
like the two extremes that, and they're not good places to be, because you don't want to appear desperate like you're begging for a job, but you also don't want to sound like you know everything. But what the sweet spot between those two extremes is red hot confidence.
Yeah.
And people respond to confidence. And confidence isn't bragging, but it's not begging. Confidence is saying, this is who I am, this is what I've done, these are some examples, and here's some stories. And and also having taken the time to really understand from the job posting itself, what is the problem that they are trying to solve here? And what are the things that your background can do to help solve that problem? What are the experiences that are related and connected to the to why they are posting that job?
Yes, I completely agree with you. I'm always like, you're solving a problem for them. Figure out what the problem is on this. Job descriptions, they tell you everything you need to know. So
Yeah,
memorize it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And practice,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
practice your
Yeah.
anticipate the questions. If you were hiring for that role, what are the questions that you would be asking?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit, move into applying for jobs. So let's be honest, it's not fun to apply for jobs. And now with applicant tracking systems being, pretty much used by every company now, the way we apply is different, right? Like we're tailoring our resumes, we're tailoring cover letters, and then you have to fill out this whole online system. Um, what advice do you have about applying to jobs?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, just a little bit about the history of applicant tracking systems.
Yeah,
So, the history of job boards really started in the late 90s with the
yeah.
evolution of monster.com. And,
Mm,
I remember specifically when somebody sent me this job board called monster.com, and I'm like, well, what is this? And all of a sudden it's like, wow, you can search for jobs based on titles, keywords, locations, how much money you want, all these different things, and zip, all these jobs would show up, which was awesome. It was great, made everything so efficient. And this is coming from a guy who grew up looking at the Rocky Mountain News and the Denver Post on Sundays, and there'd be, 50, 60 pages of job ads, and you'd have your one really good resume and you'd send it off and cross your fingers, and usually that would work.
yep,
But Monster.com started this just avalanche of new job boards, from jobbing.com to Career Builder to all these different things. And now a lot of those don't even exist anymore. But the big, and the main reason why ATSs were created is because of the job boards.
Oh,
because now
interesting.
all of a sudden you have, 500 people from all over the country applying for that one job. And there's just no way that a recruiting office has the bandwidth to go through all of these resumes and applications. And so the applicant tracking systems were created so that a computer can search for keywords and key phrases and start ranking these resumes in ways that it makes it easier for the recruiters to be able to, see who would be considered the most qualified for these positions. Um, some companies, they use them purely as a way to kind of sift through the resumes. Others use them as just a helpful crutch so that they can kind of start looking at these resumes holistically in ways that they can start seeing and ranking them based on certain things. But at the end of the day, um, you know, the applicant tracking system has certainly made it difficult for the job seekers because you have to format your resume in a way that it is going to make it through an applicant tracking system. You have to go through that job posting and identify the keywords and the key phrases that you are hoping are going to pop with the applicant tracking system so that it will rank you. And then, and then the cover letters themselves, sometimes they're not even needed. Um, but here's what I would say about applicant tracking systems. On my job board, there's probably about 70% of the companies use an applicant tracking system. And a lot of them are also just saying send in a resume and a cover letter. And so you have to have a resume that does two things. Number one, that it does conform to an applicant tracking system in such a way that it is formatted that it can easily be scanned and words can be picked up and so forth and so on. But on the other hand, you also need a resume that when a human being is reading it, they can get you very quickly. They can
Yeah.
understand you very quickly. And that there's a narrative at the top that is going to spell out and very clearly who you are, what you're about, your experience, and it's going to give that person that motivation to want to read further down. So there's you're going to ask 100 different career counselors, what's the best format, what's the best type of resume? You're going to get 100 different answers. I have my format that I believe works because I see people getting jobs from it. And I think it's something that there's been a lot of scientific research that has been done similar to what they do in advertising in terms of when people read a resume, what parts of the neurons in your brain are lighting up. And when you have clusters of information that are easily to jump back and forth to, so that someone who's reading your resume can easily bounce back and forth, you've got at most 45 seconds of a recruiter's time. And I'm being generous.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a longer than
and
I
but
said.
but if that narrative at the top immediately jumps out and somebody can see that and say, okay, I need to read further, then you've gotten over the first hurdle. And so that's an important part of it. And then the cover letters, they should not just be recitation of what's already on the resume. You have to develop a compelling story about, two or three examples of why your background and your experience makes sense for this job. If you have a personal connection or a passion for this position, that's important. I mean, I tell that particularly people in the nonprofit world, you can't, you have to make people understand, that you have a deep passion for the cause and for the position that you're going for. So it's not a perfect science. I will tell you this: the big mythology about you know you have to have a one-page resume. It's not true.
I agree.
It's case by case. I mean, if you're an
Yeah,
entry level employee, you probably don't have enough to fill 2 pages, and it's
exactly.
going to be one page, and that's totally fine.
Hmm.
Um, I do try in general, but again, it's a case by case. Try to get folks to think not too far back on your resume.
Yeah,
So, 15 years, if that's possible. And then, if there's other things on there that you think is relevant, you can even just list them as early career
yeah,
with the job and the dates if necessary. But what people are really going to be excited about is what you've been doing in the last job or two. Now, again, I know this is not a fast and steady rule because it could, you could have been at one job for the last 15, 20 years, or there could be things in your background that are relevant to the job that you're applying for that go beyond 15 years and how you weave all that in. And, that's why it's really helpful to work with folks who do resumes.
Yes.
And this is not a pitch for my business. If you want me to help you, I'm happy to do so. But there
Mhm.
are free resources at the Colorado Workforce Centers,
Yes.
at the alumni centers at your universities.
Yep.
And
Yes.
those, if you haven't had to write a resume in a long time, I highly don't recommend using AI for this. I think you're not going to get what you need from artificial intelligence, and Chat GPT will not do you any favors.
No, because AI didn't do the work. You can certainly use AI as like a tool or to get ideas, but you ultimately need to write in your achievements and how you want to sell your skills and experience.
Yeah, and from a formatting experience
Yeah.
point of
Oh,
view
yeah.
too. I mean, I've never seen a really, maybe this will change. Maybe this is the way it's going with resumes, like everything else. But I don't think it's there yet.
Yeah. I know I keep like thinking like long term, like in the future, are resumes and cover letters just going to be extinct and we're going to apply with like a 3-minute video of
Right.
us talking about our skills and experience that relate to the position? I don't know. I mean, already we're seeing a lot of jobs not asking for cover letters.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, about 10 years ago, there was this big surge for about a year, and companies were coming up saying the video resumes.
Yeah.
These are the things where,
Hmm.
and really slick, really fun, but
Yeah.
employers turned away from them. And I think part of it was they were worried about um, judging people, on how they appeared,
Yeah.
and I think people were afraid of being accused of a lot of different things. But ultimately, at the end of the day, unless you're a TV reporter or something like that, and you might be right. Maybe the video resumes will come back.
I don't know. I mean, possibly, or maybe we apply with our LinkedIn profile or some type
Yeah,
of like virtual resume, like portfolio type thing. I don't know. I mean,
yeah.
I do feel like it will change in the future. I just don't really know exactly how. But I do want to ask you more about AI because, of course, that's the hot topic. And I have been seeing these AI companies that will apply for jobs for you. And I don't recommend them because I've never tried them and I can't recommend something I've never tried. And what is your take on those types of like systems, or do you think AI is going to come into the job board space and change how jobs are posted?
Yeah, I've yet to see a significant contribution AI has made relating to job boards.
Okay.
There's there's a lot of companies. I remember when I was at Frontier, I used to get a lot of applications, and a lot of the resumes and the cover letters were all the same.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, there is these companies that if there were like massive layoffs, for example, they would do the outsourcing
Yeah.
stuff for employees that were laid off, and so they would send out resumes and cover letters on their behalf. And
Yes.
I started seeing these cover letters and these resumes that looked exactly the same, even the exact same words, but it was just the different titles and the different names. And I never could get excited about the candidates that way, you know.
Yeah.
And so I was, who knows if that's the way it's going to be.
I know, I know. I don't know because people ask me all the time, like, "Oh, should I, make a profile on this account?" I'm like, I don't know.
And I'm a big fan of AI. I mean, like for
Yeah,
example, the other day I took a picture of a big patch of my front yard
yeah,
that we had just got rid of a tree, and I said, "Hey AI, can you fill this with a big landscaping boulder and surround it with
yeah,
Colorado native plants?" And they basically did the work of what a landscape artist would do. And my wife and I looked at it and we're like, "Wow, this is great. This is perfect." So, I think there are going to be some examples of how AI is used in the hiring process very, very soon. And I'm sure, like, for example, they might be taking resumes or applications and feeding them through AI and saying, based on this criteria, who would be the most likely to succeed at this job. I mean, there's probably going to be a lot of different ways that AI can be
Yeah.
used in the hiring.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I really like using it to really dig deep into the job description and pulling out keywords and giving you sample interview questions. I
Yeah,
don't really like using it to like word things for me, but I do like it to help analyze the job description just so I can understand it better.
yeah, right. Yeah, I
So it's a
agree.
tool, it's a
Yeah,
tool like lots of different things.
yeah,
All right, let's go into the Colorado job market a little bit. So the job market right now, I mean, it's no secret that it's a competitive job market. We're seeing every day companies getting laying off multiple people. Lots of different industries are being affected. Um, and we've been in hard job markets before.
yep.
What are some strategies or things that you're seeing in this current Colorado job market?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I get asked this a lot. So when I started Andrew Hudson's jobs list as a full-time thing, it was in August of 2008, and about a week later, the Great Recession started. And
Yeah,
so, I on one hand, I was like, oh my gosh, this isn't great timing to start a business. But on the other hand, what I found is that I was getting it's not as if there were no jobs. But I think that companies were being a lot more selective about positions they were trying to fill,
yeah,
or if somebody had left, what jobs they would if they were going to refill that job and so forth. And so we made it through the recession, and then through COVID. Again, I mean, people were still hiring during COVID. It certainly had slowed down. And now we are faced with a very different economy today, which, um, there's a lot of things that are going on, particularly coming out of Washington, that are decisions that people probably weren't prepared for or really didn't understand how dramatic or drastic they were going to be. But we are where we are,
yeah,
and so I spent the last 27 years looking at Colorado employment in the economic sectors that are the mainly doing the most of the hiring. And there's really three sectors that are consistently hiring. And these are consistently hiring with fair wages and benefits, sustainable jobs, things that have life to them. And that is government, education, and healthcare.
yeah,
And these three main sectors are a huge part of Colorado's economy. Now, if we talk about government right now, it's kind of difficult to think about because on one
yeah,
hand, there's been a ton of layoffs in the federal workforce.
yeah,
We just got word from Mayor Johnston that there's going to be layoffs and furloughs because of about a $250 million budget gap over the next 2 years.
yeah,
But saying that, you have to think of government and jobs very holistically. So
yeah,
there is the federal, state, and local job market for government jobs. There's also, pockets of regional government jobs. And we have a ton of positions that are available at everything from city of Arvada to the state of Colorado to, even seriously, the city of Denver is still going to hire. They're not going to just stop hiring altogether. And when you think about all of these different governments, they have a ton of agencies that have a ton of different openings and positions that are, very specific particular skills. There's a lot of administrative
yeah,
positions out there as well in terms of what they do. So, City of Denver, for example, DIA is part of the City of Denver. The
yeah,
Office of Economic Development is part of the City of Denver. The Public Safety Office is the City of Denver. There's good jobs in every agency that you look at that way. And then you have, jobs like in the county commissions, you have jobs in like a regional transportation district, and then you also have jobs in the nonprofit sector that are either public policy think tanks or they work like the Colorado Municipal League, things of that sort. And so when you start breaking these kinds of positions down and start thinking about, all the different positions that are available in government and then the kind of service positions to government as well, then you can really start to understand, how that sector operates and the kinds of opportunities that are there. Same thing with healthcare, same thing with universities.
Yep.
Universities have, they're like miniature cities. They have a lot of
Yes.
different agencies, they have a lot of different departments, and it's not just teaching, it's being the support staff for all of that. My wife works at Metro State University, and I've worked with so many other universities where I was working with some communications job seekers the other day, and I'm like, they got communications jobs in every department. And whether it's I just posted a job with the College of Media up at the University of Colorado. They're looking for an associate dean of communications just for that particular department.
Yep.
So, thinking about it in that way, I think is going to really, really make it more, help you be more focused. And I will tell you, the more focused you are in terms of what it is you want to do, the more easy it's going to be to find a job. And I found that true throughout my entire history of doing this. The folks that have a wide or a very specific focus for what they are going to do. It's kind of like, if you're driving somewhere, you want to type into GPS, what's the quickest way to get there? And for your own, job seeking GPS, you don't want to like be driving and then, oh, well, maybe I'll take a right and that'll get me there quicker. Or, that looks like a pretty detour. And, but, at the end of the day, if your goal is to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible, having that focus and having that understanding of how to get there is going to be the thing that you are really needing. And
Yeah.
that focus is everything from what I want to do to where are the companies, the organizations, the agencies, the things that are going to provide to me that that match to my criteria and where my criteria matches theirs.
Yeah. Are you seeing like other industries like the private sector having more job openings now than they used to, or are you
Yeah, I
seeing any
mean,
type of trends there with
you know,
private?
I'm I wish I could be. I wish I could be having this conversation. That there's a ton of jobs out there, and I used to have these conversations, But the fact is that Colorado's unemployment rate right now is hovering at 5%, and we used to be below 3 not too long ago.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so, I think that the Silicon Valley kind of status that Denver and Colorado had for such a long time is starting to wear off, and so there's been a lot of tech jobs that have started to disappear here. But yeah, no, I mean, I still see jobs, particularly in those three sectors. But I
Yep.
also see jobs, in a lot of the bigger companies here. There's a DaVita, Ball,
Yep.
Aerospace, Boeing. There's companies like Ibotta that are, they're hiring a lot, and also the nonprofit sector. They're still looking for a lot of folks as well. I think, what what I also try and work with folks on is identifying transferable skills. So there might be the low hanging fruit. I did this and I want to do that again. But you might have been in marketing, but or you might have been in human resources, right? And you had to do career fairs, or you had to do a lot of other things in terms of building up the reputation of your company for make it a top place to work. Those are marketing skills, right? And there's a lot of those kinds of things. Everybody brings transferable skills that are valuable, and you have to show it that you're capable of these things. But a lot of folks are also they are going back to college and they are going back to getting training, whether it's through certification programs in computer programming or AI or
Yeah.
digital marketing or things like that that are really those are some of the you're getting a lot more job postings with those types of titles on
Yes.
them. And I know I've known people who have moved from marketing into HR. I mean, so
Yeah.
there's a lot of different opportunities out there. But again, before you even start your resume writing, or updating, start thinking about, what do you want to do? What is it that makes the most sense for you? And, and start working towards that.
Yeah, and always lean into those transferable skills like project management, communication skills, all of that, collaboration
Leadership.
skills, leadership. Yeah, yeah. Because that every company needs that.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I
Mhm.
I tell you this, the group that I feel really bad for is the early career folks.
Yeah,
Um, and we used to have this idea of the American dream that if you went through high school, you did pretty well, you could get into college. And if you did pretty well in college, there's a job waiting for you. And that pay your dues decade was your 20s to your 30s, where you're trying to figure out what it is you wanted to do and what you were put on this earth to be and what you were good at and so forth. But by your 30s, you're kind of on your way and you're moving on in your career. And I see so many entry level jobs that are coming across the board that they're paying $35,000-$40,000 a year. And that's just so hard when we are living in a city where, more than 50% of your take home is now going to rent,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so many of the things that I never had to worry about in terms of extreme healthcare costs, cell phones, the internet. I mean, things like that we didn't have to pay. And
yep,
so I think, the country as a whole has to really kind of take a gut check and say, is this really where we want to be? Straddling kids with college debt and then putting them out into a job market that is really difficult for them to start affording a house or to get married, to have kids, to begin putting money away for retirement. And I know I'm being very general here, but I just see this way too often, and it's a real struggle. And I know that some of these generations get this bad rap. It's like, um, they don't want to pay their dues. They move from one job to the other the next within a year or two, and they're just they're bouncing around. And it's to me, it's like it's not that they don't want to pay their dues, but they do want to pay their rent.
yeah. Totally. I completely agree with you. I was like, and if they're not happy, they're leaving.
Yeah,
So. You know what I will say though about this generation that I'm fascinated with, and I think they're brilliant, is this idea of side hustles. Almost every young person has a side hustle. And I'm like, that's awesome. I have a student who she has a full-time job, but on the side she refurnishes furniture. She buys them at or like thrift stores or like garage sales, and then she redo does them and sells them. And I'm like,
wow,
that's so cool.
yeah,
And with social media, people, I have another student, well, she's an alum now, but she goes around Denver and does reviews on different restaurants and posts it online.
yeah,
And I really admire this like side hustle mentality and this like kind of fun with work,
yeah,
um, and also making money at it.
yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it's really smart. I mean, my daughter, she's now 15, but when she was 12, she came to us with a proposal that she didn't have to go to school because she was going to be a social media influencer.
Yes, yes,
I'm like,
yes.
no, that's not going to happen. But
Yeah.
but you're right though. I mean, it's like, I do love that whole idea. I mean, one of the things that I hear from recruiters a lot is one of the frustrations is, and again, this is a generational thing, I think, is that so many of the kids that are coming out of college, they've never had a professional job.
Yeah.
They might have had an internship or something, but and it's funny because I had a work ethic. I was working in restaurants since I was 14 years old.
Oh yeah.
And if I wasn't working in a restaurant, I was shoveling snow, or I was raking leaves, or I was mowing lawns, or and of course, it was all this stuff just to afford the things my parents would never buy me.
Yep.
I needed those
Mhm.
new topsiders, or I wanted to go to Celebrity Sports Center and play pinball, and I needed them, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was always something, and and this is an important part, I think, for any job seeker as well, is like, you know, uh, who you are and who you became is a direct result of a lot of things throughout your life, in terms of your
Yeah.
personality, your work ethic, all of these things. I'm a jazz musician, right? When I first became a public relations person, I kind of fell into it, but all of a sudden I started thinking it makes sense. I have to think quick on my feet. I have to communicate with a lot of different people. about different things. I have to absorb information very quickly. I have to improvise. I mean, all of those
Yeah.
things that, I can't put them on paper and say, I got a degree in that, but that was my experience and that's my personality. That's who I was.
Yeah.
And even working in restaurants, I mean, having to serve 250 meals a night and having crisis communications and having an entire tray of food fall on the floor and just having to drop everything and take care of that and then get back on track. I mean, all of those different things that were part of being a press secretary. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like every single day, you don't know what the next crisis is going to be, and you have to deal with
True.
things quickly, and
Mhm.
all of those things. And I think everybody has that in their lives somehow.
Agreed. Totally. Yeah. Whenever I see someone's resume where it's like they worked at Starbucks, I'm like, oh, you can do anything. I was like, there's so much to
Yeah.
work with here.
Oh yeah, no, it's funny when I used to hire folks when I was in the corporate world. One of the questions I would ask when it was coming down to like maybe two or three finalists is I would ask, "Did you ever work in a restaurant?"
Yep.
And it wasn't the deciding factor, but if all of a sudden their eyes lit up and they started telling me about their experiences and so forth, and I'm kind of like, "Yeah, you're my people."
Yep.
It's
Yep.
like,
Yep. 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 I do think that those jobs really help you understand people, helps you communicate. I've always worked in some type of like customer service role, and I now in career coaching treat my students or alumni or people I meet with that like my customer. And I lead with that kind of customer service, like tailoring my advice, tailoring my coaching
yeah, me too.
to the person.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
Yeah.
absolutely right.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap it up here. What advice would you give to job seekers trying to stand out in today's competitive market?
Oh, the million-dollar question.
I know. I know.
Um, you know, again, I think the main thing is to identify, and this sounds like so career consultant speak, but identify yourself through a brand. Like, who are you? When you can authentically talk about yourself, about your accomplishments, about your challenges, how you've overcome things, how you've been able to lean into problems. How is it that you've been able to motivate and inspire folks? And what were the things that you did that convinced people that you were the right person for the job? I mean, think about the stories. The storytelling is such an important part of the whole job seeking process. If you're in an interview, that is such an important touch point and such an important opportunity to be able to really, they don't want to just hear you talk about the things they're reading on your resume. They want to understand more. And when I do consulting with for companies on interviewing, one of the things I always find is that the person who really takes charge of that interview is the one who's telling stories. And I mentioned this earlier. People are dropping their pencils, and you can just see these little imagination moments going off in their head, and the level of questions that they're asking, the kinds of things they're trying to understand about this person is different than the other candidates. And when
Yeah.
they leave, the responses, if it's like a panel that has been doing the interviewing outside of the interviewer's earshot, they're saying, she really understood us. He really took the time to research and understand how his background is for this. I could imagine him in front of our clients. Think about that. You've created that imagination already. Really, all of these things you want them to think about you. Think about that too. Now, of course, on the flip side of that, I've also heard folks say, wow, what a missed opportunity. I was really surprised his resume didn't really match up with how he described himself. And then the really cruel one I heard was, God, where do I go to get my 20 minutes back? Which is harsh, but you don't want to be that person either. And think if you have if you struggle interviewing, because I know that that's a hard thing.
Mhm.
um, ask ask a friend, ask your spouse, whatever, to do some mock interviewing with you, so you can practice the questions that you anticipate are going to be asked.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that I would like insist on in any university is that career services is not just an extracurricular thing, it's part of the curriculum. because learning how to be a job seeker, learning how to look for a job is not something that's just going to happen after college. It's something that is constantly evolving over your career. And I just run into so many people who just don't think about or have the job seeking skills that will be very helpful to them. And it's one of those things. So
Yes, thank you for plugging career services because I scream it from the rooftop. I'm like, if go to career services, and a lot of times it feels like it's an afterthought, or
yeah,
like, oh, we have that benefit, but
yeah,
even if you graduated 10 years ago, reach out, see if there's alumni benefits. I used to
yeah,
work in the alumni career services at Metro, and I had people come back that graduated many years ago, and it's just such a great resource. And no one really teaches you how to do these things. It's
yeah.
really it's rare that you get time to sit there and reflect on how you do what you do at work and why you're good at it. And having someone that doesn't know you is really helpful to ask those questions and pull things out of you. Um, so yeah, I love career services, of course. So
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah. Well, you do great work, and I know that it's becoming more of a thing where the students and the parents of students
Yep,
are looking at it in terms of the investment. It's like
absolutely. Yeah,
if we're going to be putting our kid into this university, is there services that are going to help him get a job at the end?
yep.
And it is an important question to ask.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And thank you for dedicating your career to the job search and the job seekers and making it easy for people in Colorado to find really good positions because it's hard. It's hard. A lot of times when I meet with people and they're like, I just don't know where to look, I don't know where to start. And like you said before, some job boards have no real jobs or have old postings or or it can be very confusing or, whatever, but your job board is consistently having good positions, real positions, and I highly recommend people check it out.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's Andrew Hudson's jobslist.com, or you can just type in AH jobs list and go to it frequently. There's new jobs
Mhm.
coming up throughout the day. And yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me. It was nice to
For
meet you
sure.
and just I love talking about this stuff. I could do it all day. Well, I do, but
I'm happy to help anytime.
Thanks.